Something's weird about Washington, D.C. And the same you see here. This is the Brexit vote, and by the way, this is Scotland, so don't look at that. This is the England with the center here, London. London distinctly voted differently than all the other regions in the country. Okay? So if you take Scotland and Northern Ireland away, which are part of the United Kingdom, but of course are not England, London has 60% in favor of Remain. While the rest of the United Kingdom voted to leave some of the regions with a vast majority, right? So something is weird about that. So if you actually want to map this, you see that cities like Manchester, cities like London, Bristol, they get quite some traction when it comes to the vote Remain, while the countryside, the rural areas, vote overwhelming in terms of vote Leave. Okay, so this is the puzzle. There seems to be a divide, and I guess it's true in many of your countries too. I mean, just take the case of Istanbul. Istanbul is completely detached from the rest of Turkey in terms of values. Like parts of Istanbul, they voted 80% against the famous referendum that changed the Republican system to the presidential system. So there seems to be a divide between cities and rural areas, and that might hold true in many countries. So it's philosophically interesting why that happens. Why just because there is a city environment, people have different political preferences than in the countryside. And I think this will be one of the big futures. If we talk about megatrends, I think this is one big trend that you want to map, how this is going to divide between the rural and the urban areas. So my argument is a little bit complex, so it goes through a couple of steps. What we will do this morning, but hopefully it will be insightful. So first I look at social psychology and the city environments. Then I look at social psychology and liberals. Like by social psychology I mean how people think, like what are their personality traits and what might be distinct in a city environment, what might be distinct about liberals. And then we look at values. Because if people are different, they choose different political values. And I say from the different experiences that people have, but also from the different character traits, we can make some inference about values. And then lastly, I will discuss with you jointly a little bit about what the values of liberalism are and whether urban values are liberal values and how this all ties together. Okay? So this is kind of a, I know, rather complex argument to make, but it's also something that is currently not very well researched. So it's something that is rather state of the art. So let's look at social psychology and the city. And this is, of course, a famous painting by Bruegel, where you can see the disordered life of cities. And what I urge you to do is a little personal exercise first. But before we do that, a couple of disclaimers. Because every time I do a Myers-Briggs test, there is some objection, of course, to the methodology of a Myers-Briggs test, and it has some downturns, okay? So it's a personality assessment, it takes you roughly 8 to 10 minutes, and there are some methodological problems with the test itself. Nevertheless, it is one of the most robust tests that you can take to assess personality traits. And the more sophisticated versions of this are still used in psychology papers and accepted amongst all top psychologists in the field of academia. So this is a rough sketch, but it's nevertheless helpful and will be helpful for the exercise. So please go to 16personalities.com and you can take the test, and the test is also available in your own languages. So there is different language variants, it's not only in English. So for the ones that have done, they have like a 10-minute break, but for the others, 16personalities.com and take the test.